what is this over going to be for Boise and Oregon? I mean, Boise has zero defense. Oregon obviously was taking a break this past. What is this? What is this total going to be? Oregon, I mean, Georgia Southern scored how much? You can't sell me on this Lenora Sellers. The RPO with Rocket, fine. There's no passing game whatsoever. And that was the most fraud box score South Carolina is a play against for a lot of weeks coming up.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Week 1 college football betting recap. Quick Week 2 look ahead. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Colin Wilson. Colin, just sweating from noon or 11 a.m. your time till midnight. It felt good to be back.
Oh, it was absolutely electric yesterday. I mean, there was just so many stories to see folded out, so many new offenses, so many new defenses. You know, the initial and then just the whole like June, July, feeling like Hawaii getting 2 TDs against UCLA was going to cash, and then kind of feeling deflated after Delaware State. Being on Notre Dame, tackles get hurt, you back off of that. I mean, it was like a whole churn. These week 1 lines are out for so long, 3-4 months, that you can play like you honestly have feelings for one side, you can have feelings for the other side, and then like I'm so glad we're closing the book. We're going to week 2, but I love these voicemails.
Yeah, we do have some voicemails to get to. Week 1, yeah, I've always said week 1 is very difficult. And lines are out for a while, and there's so much change, and that change is even getting more and more severe with each passing year in college football. I didn't have a losing week 1 for the first time in my life. I think I didn't have a great week, but I didn't lose money. So that was actually a net positive for me. I do have a rant right off the bat. It's Georgia State. That's like, oh man, here's the thing. Like a lot of times in college football on a Saturday, all your season comes down to, there's going to be a lot of variance in one season. Your season comes down to a couple games each Saturday. And ideally you don't have any of these games, right? All your games go according to plan. Like you have some losses that are just blowout losses. And then you have more wins that are easy wins than your losses. And then you have a good, 55% year. But in reality, it's teenagers playing a game with an oblong ball, and you're betting on that. So there's going to be some crazy stuff that happens. So there's usually like 2 games on a Saturday that if you're just running good throughout a season, you get both of those games. Like just the crazy bounce late, the backdoor touchdown. If you're not, both those games go against you. And some seasons, you just have that happen every weekend for the good and bad. Like 2 years ago, every single weekend, I think those good things happened to me. Every Saturday, like 2 or 3 games, they all flip my way. And you have an amazing year. I've had seasons where the complete opposite is true, and you have a terrible year. But yesterday, Georgia State was that swing game for me. I mean, Syracuse should have covered too. They got hosed by the refs. They should have covered every number. But I also got fairly fortunate with Stanford, I think. So Georgia State game to me was the swing game. Georgia State, and I hate to waste a good number, above 21, and a good spot and a good handicap, because that staff knew Georgia Tech. They were so prepared for everything that Georgia Tech wanted to do. Georgia Tech had 11 rushing yards in the first quarter. First drive of the game, Georgia State all the way down the field. At the 1st and goal at the 1, they don't score. I mean, you got to be kidding me. They don't score. Stop Georgia Tech. Georgia State gets the ball back at the 15, fumbles the snap. Georgia Tech gets it, goes in for a touchdown. 7. Next drive, Georgia State down to the 1, don't score again. They kick a field goal. And so they had 7 plays inside the 3. They had 3 points, and Georgia Tech had. So then later in the game, I'm like, this is over. There's no way a team like Georgia State, who's started completely over, is going to be able to overcome this. later in the game, Georgia State decides to go for 2, and I'm like, oh god, this is going to cost me the cover somehow. They don't get a wide open pass. It's right in the chest, and the kid just drops it. And then late in the game, Georgia State drives all the way down to the 5 again. They even have to deal with their quarterback getting hurt and going out of play, and they turn it over on downs, and they lose by 22. Oh, that one hurt. Hopefully the gods get me back. But that's my rant of the week.
Well, I
That was
think you
just
should.
such a painful one.
I just think you should be proud of yourself for not having any UMass money because you told me. You told me. And boy, and here we go
Special
rolling
teams.
right into it, man. I'm telling you, these guys. I'm done. The Minutemen are done. They're at the kiddie table to Thanksgiving. I'll never see them for the rest of the day. I'm not
I've
going
been
back.
there. I've been there with that feeling. I thought I had it on for. I was flipping on one of my TVs with that game, and 2 of the plays I saw were UMass missed field goals. So I was feeling for you. Yeah, UMass just looked. They didn't look like. They looked physically a lot worse than EMU, which is surprising.
Mhm.
Just yeah, I don't.
You want to
That program's in the tank.
You want a hot box score fraud to start the day off? Let's go ahead and get that one out of the way because there's one team whose box score really was like, oh my God. South Carolina against Old Dominion. Old Dominion, total yards 305 to South Carolina's 288. They ran 7 less plays, so they easily beat them in total offense for the game. ODU had 4 turnovers and spotted South Carolina 14 points. Gamecocks won 23-19. You can't sell me on this Lenore Sellers. The RPO with Rocket, fine. There's no passing game whatsoever. And that was the most fraud box score South Carolina is a play against for a lot of weeks coming up.
I hope that that I had to turn that game on. I have ODU under and South Carolina over, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! I'm gonna lose both in week 1, and then
that's how I felt about Rice and Sam Houston. Great call on Sam Houston. I got the futures on him, but man, by Rice total, needed that one. It didn't look good. Sam Houston looks great.
They finally have an offense. It was nice to see. They got receivers healthy. They have a better quarterback. They had Rice's home field advantage is sad, by the way. But before we get to voicemails, let's talk about some of the top 10 games that marquee. I think the winners of the day we'll start Miami beating Florida. You had a great call there. I overthought that game. I threw Florida in a round robin. I originally just said, look, if this is going to come down to the trenches, Miami's going to win. Mm-hmm. And not only did it come down to the trenches, it came elsewhere. Miami dominated. And I thought you made a great point that Cam Ward can be mistake prone when he's under pressure. Florida was not going to be able to create pressure, and they weren't. And but Miami also had guys wide open. They dominated the Florida offensive line. That was, from a Florida perspective, that was a humiliating loss. Miami looked fantastic, and they're clearly the favorite, I think, in the ACC because Clemson. Well, I don't think Clemson could still win the ACC. Yeah, they're not a player in the national title picture, but they could still. Have you guys seen the ACC? So they could still win the ACC, but their Klubnik didn't take the next step. The offense, Dabo's 4th down decision making. You're like a 2 touchdown dog. Mm-hmm. So I'm more concerned about Clemson than Texas A&M. Like Texas A&M can drastically improve.
And it was game 1 of new head coach.
Yeah,
right?
game 1, new head coach and new scheme. And like Elko has shown that his teams can improve. This is like year 2 of Riley and Klubnik, right? You bring all everyone back, and the defense will be fine, but the offense just wasn't there, and Georgia just looked so much more athletic, physical, and eventually overpowered and just consumed Clemson, just overwhelmed them in the second half. So I think Georgia, Miami, and then before I let you go, Penn State were the 3 teams that I think, and then you got to give credit to Notre Dame too for going College Station getting the win. Those were the kind of the 4 winners, I think, of week 1.
Boy, talk about the market being completely wrong on a point spread than West Virginia, Penn State. It looked to me like this Drew Aller is going to have an absolutely monster season from some of the highlights from the touchdown throws. 11 of 17, 3 TDs, 216 yards passing. Penn State's offense, it looks like it's been jump started from what they've been trying to have the past 2 or 3 years. So congrats to them. And then, the handicap back on Florida, if you cannot create any havoc, Cam Ward is going to chew you up. One quarterback hurry was produced by the Gators defense. Miami was allowed to go 5 of 10 third downs. Cam Ward went for 385 in the air with 3 touchdowns. If you're going to let him roam loose and you're not going to put any pressure on him, this is what's going to happen. So, Stuck, here's the big thing for me over the next 48 hours. I've got to come up with some sort of Miami deliverable, because when they play at their best, the box score looks like what I'm staring at right now about how much they dominated Florida. So when you go into their schedule, right, because they don't play Clemson. That's the one thing that we talked about in the ACC podcast. Like Miami,
Clemson's defensive line could maybe give them problems, but they don't play them.
Right, but when you look at the regular season schedule for Miami, I couldn't find, and I'm going to do a deep dive today. Like, is there a top 50 havoc unit or defense on this schedule for Miami? Because I really couldn't name one out off that schedule, which means I should be acting pretty fast on some sort of Miami future, which I'll get figured out here. But they looked that impressive, and the more important thing is that they looked that disciplined from a penalty perspective. I was shocked. 2 penalties for 26 yards from a Cristobal coach team, Miami. That's improvement. That's a big time improvement.
Yeah, and he has a time management guy now, so maybe he doesn't mess those up. I did say with Miami before the year that you want to find a spot if you see, it all clicking. You want to find a spot where you can bet on their upside, and that's how you want to bet on this Miami team, like major upside. So potential national title futures. So I'll have to shop around and see if the market. Sometimes the market overreacts, and then there's no value in certain types of futures. So, but that team, from a talent perspective, has enough to win the national title. I don't know if Cam Ward can get through the gauntlet without costing his team, but he looked really good especially for his first game there.
The playoff will be filled with havoc-minded defenses. I mean, I can't imagine what this Georgia defense would do to Cam Ward. Could be kind of fun to watch. I'm going to pivot to you because this is your team, and this is the team that you have a future on. Connor Weigman, 12 of 30 passing, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I'm not sure if this is a product of the Colin Klein offense or if this is just Weigman's not a fit or Weigman hasn't progressed. Stuck, do you think they're going to go to Marcel Reed to run some sort of RPO 2-back system? Because this offense is not working for A&M.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern for A&M is, yes, I give them some leeway. They're playing a top 5 defense,
right,
and a top 5 secondary. And you had some offensive line questions, and it's a new scheme, but Weigman's been around for long enough that I expected him to be better than that. I mean, this is his 3rd year as a starter. He finished 12 of 30 for 100 yards. And it just didn't look good. So with, no touchdowns, 2 picks. So yeah, I think that they might look into potentially making a change. I don't know. I mean, you play McNeese State. So I think you play McNeese State at home this week. So maybe you get both some looks this week, but then you're at Florida, you're home against Bowling Green. And then, you play Arkansas. So your schedule gets a little easier here to potentially make some changes before, you host LSU. You go to Auburn, you host Texas late in the season, you host Missouri. So I think it's a possibility because that was a terrible performance. He might get it. He's been around a while. You might get a mulligan, but the leash, I think, is going to be pretty short.
Yeah, I still think I'm not sure of what Colin Klein has in his playbook is for Connor Weigman. So I definitely would keep my eyes out here against McNeese, and he's got to light it up. Really got to light it up.
Yeah. The one thing with Drew Aller, it's funny because I was having he has all the talent. He can make all the throws, and like NFL scouts are going to love him, and he looked great. But it's funny. I'm having a little bit of deja vu. Now the last year, Penn State rolled West Virginia by 23, much to your chagrin. And Drew Aller went bonkers. I think he threw for like 330 and had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And then everyone was like Penn State, right? So and now this happened again. Aller didn't even have as good of numbers. I think he only threw for like 212. But Penn State looked really good. James Franklin dominated and beat another unranked team. The difference is there's Kotelnicki there, though. So that is maybe where this Penn State team might be different. But just know that this isn't Franklin's first rodeo dominating an unranked team and covering as a favorite while everything looks great. It's can Penn State beat the elite teams? That's still the question. Because everyone always gets it. It's funny to me because maybe the tune has changed because of Kotelnicki and Aller's taking the next step. But this tune gets whistled every single season. Penn State dominates a team that's like ranked 25th in week 1. And then everyone's like, this is the year. And then they lose to Michigan.
Well, I will say Kotelnicki's fingerprint is all over this box score. Standard downs, Penn State averaged 7.1 yards per play. The national average is 5.6. That is a Kotelnicki product. When you look at methodical drives, they had one methodical drive, which was national average, but more importantly, double the amount of national average in explosive drives that they had. That is a Kotelnicki product. 8.5 yards per play and passing downs. It's a very impressive box score from Aller, from the offense, from everybody involved, and the most important thing, finishing drives, which I think you're going to ban me from talking about because of Arkansas. 4.8 points every time Penn State got inside the 40. So everything you would want to see out of the Penn State offense, which the market was telling me something's broken with Penn State. I mean, that number was just flying off the board for West Virginia. Well, it was the exact opposite. The Penn State offense is just fine, and we will continue to monitor Aller and how deep he throws. And boy, we got some video to dissect, though. Those are some really good passes downfield that hit over the middle.
Yeah, for what it's worth, which I found surprising, FBS teams in week 1, FBS teams went 58-0 against FCS teams. We didn't get any upsets. Arkansas State almost lost. Middle Tennessee State almost lost. Who else? There was a couple other ones. New Mexico State. I was rooting for that for my win total. They almost lost.
I've got Texas Tech and Texas State flagged for their box scores. So
Texas Tech got
Texas State.
They played
Lamar.
Texas Tech. They played their ex quarterback MacGyver. I think he used to be at Texas Tech, and they should have lost. I mean, Abilene Christian was on the goal line at the 2 at the end of regulation, down by 3, and they couldn't get it in. And they kicked a field goal. I thought they should have went for it. I mean, you're 35-point dogs, and then in overtime, Texas Tech scored. Abilene Christian scored. Then they decided to go for 2, and they didn't get it. MacGyver for Abilene threw for 506 against Tech.
Well, the Texas State defense could not contain Lamar. Lamar went crazy in the second half. Texas State won 34-27. Not really a good look for this defense. So, we'll see if they can pick it up, especially for the pass. They gave up too many passes. Looks like turnovers were a problem, but something's going on in the state of Texas. And before we get to the voicemails, can I just say Ohio State got 17 points straight off of turnovers. Like they actually should have won the game like 35-6 over Akron. It was not impressive whatsoever. Don't even look at that 50 burger and think that that's really what happened. They struggled.
Well, are you gonna talk about your Ducks against Idaho then? Or are you just gonna pass that one?
We know Dan Lanning didn't want to play Idaho. No one wants a piece of the Vandals, so we'll give him a pass.
That was not overly impressive by the Ducks. It was like 17-14 against Idaho in late in the third quarter. The other team that was not impressive to me with a final score that was misleading. I almost had a conniption when if Fresno State didn't cover 21.5. They were going in down 13. They were at the goal line. They threw a pick 6 late. Michigan, I mean, they can't throw it. Mm-hmm. We kind of knew this going in, but they start Davis Warren, who goes 15 of 25 for 118. You know what the 118 was? Colston Loveland, 8 for 87. I mean, the receivers had, I think, 20 yards receiving against Fresno State.
What's the
They
A
lost,
dot
and
here?
Fresno State lost a corner to the NFL too. I know that they still have a decent secondary, but I mean it's a Mountain West team, and you're at home, and they couldn't complete a forward pass to the. So that's concerning against Texas. So what does that mean? You're gonna get a million carries, and you're trying to take advantage of that Texas defensive front that lost 2 pros, because I didn't see
Yeah,
much that says, because the Texas secondary has questions, but the Texas secondary is more talented than Fresno.
right.
There was just no one. The inaccurate passes all over. The offensive line also wasn't great in pass protection. That was ugly for Michigan from an offensive perspective. We know the defense is going to be good.
And now what's going to happen is you've seen a point spread that was hanging around, I think Texas -1 against Michigan most of the summer. Now I saw it as big as -5.5 before I went to bed last night at some of the big national books. And when you take a look at what Texas did yesterday on the ground, Jared Gibson went 10 for 67. So that shows that they do have a little bit of a pulse in the running game. But this is the Colorado State defense, and I expect these kind of numbers. Quinn Ewers goes 20 of 27 for 263 touchdowns and an INT. Isaiah Bond got reeled in a touchdown. Silas Bolden reeled in a touchdown. Matthew Golden had 2. The problem with this box score is that Texas was able to defend the Colorado State passing attack. That is not applicable to the handicap against Michigan whatsoever. So it's a little bit of a gap there to still see if Texas is going to be able to defend what Michigan does on the ground. So no, I mean, I'm happy for Texas. I'm happy for the Longhorns, but what they did defensively and offensively is just not going to apply to Michigan.
Speaking of your finishing drives, Boise State, Georgia Southern.
I saw your tweet.
They had 12 touchdowns and 12 trips. The 56-45 final. Boise State's defense has holes. Ashton Genty, though, my clown take of the week is that Georgia Southern would be able to slow down Ashton Genty enough. He had 6 touchdowns.
What is this over going to be for Boise and Oregon? I mean, Boise has 0 defense. Oregon obviously was taking a break this past. What is this? What is this total going to be? Oregon, I mean, Georgia Southern scored how much? At will?
Yeah, 4 with French at quarterback. Speak French to me. JC French threw for 322. I don't know how that happened.
2 TDs.
And he ran. Yeah, he like at first Georgia just sort of, I thought it was going to be a long day for Georgia Southern, but they were down like 20 and came all the way back, and then Boise extended late. Crazy game there, but yeah, the Boise defense has major concerns.
JC French hit 11 different targets in this box score. I mean, like, they just spread it everywhere. It's crazy.
Yep. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Diego. But before we do get out of here, we have to talk the Monday night game. Boston College against Florida State. Florida State is a 16.5, 17-point favorite, total sitting around 50. At under 17, I'd lean Florida State. The situation is just giving me pause with Florida State having to come back from overseas. Now they do get a couple extra days, but they had to put some stuff on film. BC under new staff has not. Historically, those teams playing for the first time week 1 have had an edge. Doesn't mean they're guaranteed to cover. But in conference specifically, in conference play, those teams are 16-4 against the spread in this situation. Small sample size, but pretty overwhelming results. So I might sit on the sidelines, but I lean Florida State below this number. I might look live. But what do you got here? You like the Noles?
Yeah, after I adjusted the Ireland game, it made this game 17.5. So when I saw 16.5, I took Florida State, because you should get a completely inspired effort here, especially on the defensive side of the ball, considering how lackluster it was. Tackling, fundamentals, everything was so bad. I expect Florida State to regress back to their norm, which is much better than what we saw in Ireland. And then when you look at the Boston College offense, right, I expect there to be some issues having a high success rate in game 1 with Bill O'Brien coming out with a 2 tight end set for Thomas Castellanos. And listen, this is not Haynes King. This is not Jamal Haynes. This is a different Boston College offense with Trayshawn Ward, whose numbers have completely fallen off the table since his time at Florida State. He was 2.8 yards after contact last year at Kansas State. That would be an offense I would expect you to be 3.5 or higher. So he lost a little bit of juice last year. When you look into their wide receivers, there's not anyone there that's explosive. I think this is a great spot for the Florida State defense to really exercise their demons from what they had in Ireland. So not only do I like Florida State minus 17 or better if you can get it, I'm probably going to slip in a bet on the app on Boston College's team total under in the first half because you should get the best Florida State defensive effort here. And this is a new offense for Thomas Castellanos and Bill O'Brien at the helm. So we've seen coaches in their first game really struggle to get the offenses started in the first half this weekend. So I think this is no different.
Yeah, huge game for the Florida State defensive front. They need to show up here. Syracuse, by the way, I mentioned them, they should have covered, but they had issues defending the run. They couldn't set an edge. They couldn't set the edge. And Marlo Wax, he might be out for the year. I haven't seen an update
That's
on
bad.
him, but he was out on crutches. And now you're playing Georgia Tech, who obviously wants to run the ball. So more on that game later in the week. But that will do it for us. Thanks to Colin for joining me as always. Thanks to our producers. Thanks most importantly to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Hit that like, subscribe button on our new YouTube channel if you haven't already. Appreciate the help with the growth there. Leave a 5-star review. Did 10 giveaways last week. Just leave a 5-star review. Say anything you want. Say Diego. Call me the president of the Diego Club, the original president of the Diego Club. Anything you want. Yell at Colin about Bobby Petrino. It doesn't matter. Just 5-star review, and I'll do a bunch of giveaways. But thanks for tuning in. It's time for us to go get to work on week 2. We will be back early in the week with the new BCS show. Group of 5 guys midweek. Colin and I'll be back with the full week 2 college football betting preview later in the week. Live show 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday as always. We're in the mix now. It's just time to grind and find winners. We'll see y'all later in the week. Cheers.
Peace out.